just to consider, if you just imagine for a second, you have these levers that you can pull in your training. One of the levers is duration, one is frequency, and one is effort. So my general advice for any level of runner is making sure that you have the right structure and you're not pulling more than one lever at once. So for example, if you are running 3 days a week, you don't want to go to 4 or 5 days a week and be building your distance significantly at the same time. Now, certainly it's going to go up because you're running 2 more times that week, but you don't want to be like, oh, I normally do like a 3-3-8, and now I'm going to go 3-6-6-10, because your overall weekly distance is going to go way through the roof. So you don't want to pull on that frequency lever and the distance lever really hard together. This is Early Miles, and I'm Steve Gonzer. On this show, we talk to runners, coaches, clinicians, and thinkers about the moments that shaped how they train, how they think, and how they ended up where they are. Early Miles is ad-free and supported by runners who are members of the RunSmart app. RunSmart is a training platform built by physical therapists. If you have an upcoming race or are looking to train and run smart, you can download the RunSmart app from the App Store or Google Play. And now, today's episode. Hey everyone, this is a special episode I recorded for the Buffalo Half and Full Marathon. I'm doing a little bit of partnership with them to help people get ready for their race. I think it has a lot of great information for every level of runner, and I want to share it here on our podcast just to get more eyes on it, especially it's January when this is released, and there's a lot of questions on how to structure your year if you're coming back after injury or if you're looking to accomplish great things this year. It's going to talk about a lot of different topics. So I hope you enjoy it and put it into practice. I think you'll see some results. So let's jump into that episode. My goal for this is, I've run Buffalo multiple times. I've run many other races. I've run Boston and Berlin and a lot of the majors. I've done Ironmans, and I think I've taken a lot away, but I've also trained thousands of runners, and particularly a lot of new runners and runners who we call them masters. I'm now 40 years old, so I can now call myself a masters runner, but there's different training for runners who, maybe aren't elite. And honestly, I think majority of the things we're going to talk about work for elite as well. But when you are not an elite runner, you have a job, you have kids, you have a lot of stuff to take care of, you need to make sure that your training is aligned to not only get a good performance that you're proud of, whether that's just finishing or a new time, but you also want to maybe not get hurt, which is really what we lean into with RunSmart is, injury prevention is always first. You want to have a plan that's not going to get you hurt, because really what we're going to talk about in pieces today is consistency over time is where you get more fit. It's where you feel better. It's where you enjoy running more. So maybe this is your first race and you're like, I don't know how anyone enjoys this. I'm out to accomplish this goal or whatever. As someone who's been running for a long time, if you can do this the right way, not get hurt, and get to the point where your fitness is improving, this is an amazing, enjoyable experience training for a half or full marathon. I think you talk about a lot of runners who get the bug, and it's usually because you finish this and you just realize what it transforms you into. It transforms you, I think, into a better human, and there's no better way. I'm one of those guys that will try to encourage anyone I see to run. And my selling point, because a lot of people are like, I don't know how you do that. It's so boring, or I'm so out of breath and I hurt and all these things. My selling point to everyone, and if you're a new runner, I think this is for you, which is just get to the point where you can go out for a run and not be out of breath. And for some of you, that's like, check the box. I can do that. It's not a big deal. I can go for 3 or 5 miles and I can talk through it. I can, chat with my running friends and it's all good. For those of you that can't, that's the holy grail, I think, of not just training for a race, but just using running as a fitness lever that you can go to. Because for me and for a lot of people I've treated over the years as a physical therapist and a lot of the runners I've trained, there is no better way to improve your mental state and your mental health than, I think, running. You can go out, some people will talk about, I can lift weights and do that, or I can do X, Y, Z, I can go play tennis or whatever. 20-minute run can completely shift your mindset for the day. Even if it's a bad day, you can run through those. I know a lot of runners have used running to work through tough parts of their lives. So it's a really amazing thing to embark on. And what we want to do today is, whether this is your first marathon or half marathon or your 10th or your 100th, is just instill some training tips for you. So as you get ready, you can implement these. Now, RunSmart is the official training partner. And a lot of things I'm going to talk about today are integrated right into your plan. So if you want more of a system that you can just plug and play and it'll handle a lot of this for you, go there. You can sign up for free, build your plan. But if you have a coach or you're, God forbid, you're going out and you're just kind of winging it, which please don't do that. This will help you, I think, still. Or if you found a PDF online that you're like, oh, I'll just, try this. Or maybe you're using ChatGPT or something. I don't know. The things I'm going to instill with you today are things that I've learned over the years that really make a difference. They help runners prevent injury and get across the finish line in a good spot. Now, I will also say that this isn't going to maybe be the prettiest. We're not going to edit this a lot. It's just going to be a lot of the interviews, especially, will be just conversation, going back and forth, talking through things, ideas, concepts, stories, things like that. And I know our last episode of this will be all about the course. So I'm glad that you're here. And I want to start in January, which it is right now. We've got a cold streak coming through. We got a lot of snow. We're going to talk about that. But I want to just talk about general training principles of how long do you need to train for a half or full marathon? Where should you be right now? And a lot of it, you're going to hear me say this over and over, it depends, because there's just different factors that play into how well this can go for you. But if we just take... before actually I start, we do have a guest who is my dog in this room, and he always sits in on my podcast. So he is usually pretty good. He's sitting at this window if you're watching on video, and you might be able to see him, but he is also very naughty. So there's a good chance that he's going to cause some problems during this. So we'll see how it goes. But when we talk about marathon and half marathon training in January, how does that differ from one race to the next? If you're a marathoner, you should absolutely be training by now. Now, generally what I'll tell marathoners is you want about 10, that's bad advice. You'd want anywhere in the low end about 16 weeks to train for that race and 20 weeks at the top end. There's two reasons for that. One, if you're coming into this really fit, you're like, I've been running 4 times a week or whatever. I have a base of a long run of 8 miles or 10 miles. You can get into that plan a little bit quicker and you don't need as much time because you have like a running base. If you're starting from scratch, you need a longer runway so that you have time to build up not only your fitness, but also your body's tolerance to running. And one area I think that's really important to address for all runners is even if you've run for a long time in your life, if you're coming off a time where you haven't been running or you're not a runner, quote unquote, in general, or not yet, it's more than just fitness, because we'll see runners who will be really fit. They do spin classes. They work out all the time. They play tennis. They do all these things. They're very active, but running is very unique. You're going to take 80 steps a minute on one leg, 160 for both. And what'll happen over time is that repetitive pounding, because the average footstep is going to put into your body 2 to 4 times your body weight, 160 times a minute into the body. It's really apt to break down when you have to ramp very quickly. Now, I like if you are coming in with like, I can run a couple miles, I can run 5 or 6 miles, and you want that 20-week plan. That's already passed at the time of this recording, but you want to have that time frame. The other reason why it's really important is to give yourself enough time is that when you are not a professional, even if you are a professional, and you have young kids like I do, or you have, your career going on and all these things, and then there's also flu season, like things are going to come up along this journey, whether you're in the half or the full. So regardless of that race, you need a runway that you can feel comfortable. Like if I miss a week, I'll be okay. Maybe your knee gets sore, you need to take some time off. You get the flu, you need a week off to kind of recover from that. Having enough time is really important. I'll see a lot of times, and we'll talk about this, is, a lot of people get in trouble for a couple of reasons. And it's usually because they don't have enough time. So they miss a week, they panic, they force too many runs in a row, and then they end up getting in trouble because of that. So we want to make sure that we're really avoiding that. 20 weeks is great, it's already passed, but you really need that 16 to 20 weeks for a full marathon. The longer, the better if you're coming in with not a lot of running fitness, whether, certainly if you have good fitness, but not running fitness, you're going to come in a little bit easier because your cardiovascular system will be good, your heart and your lungs. If you're coming in off the couch in a layup of a long time, and maybe your friend just said, hey, let's sign up for the Buffalo Full, and you're like, I'm 22 years old and I can do whatever I want, you're going to be able to get away with that. So you just want to make sure that you have the time to train. Now, when we talk about half marathons, it's really going to be fairly similar in the concept. You don't need as much time because, typically your long runs will be different, your training will be different, but the half we really like our runners to have at least 14 weeks to train for a half. Now, that's 14 weeks is if you're coming in with a good running base, you can run 4 or 5 miles, maybe 3 to 4 miles, and you're not gassed, you're not hurt from that. You can do that a couple times a week. Now, if you are someone who's coming off the bench and you haven't done stuff, maybe the holidays caught up with you, the new year caught up with you, and you're kind of maybe lagging behind a little bit, you're going to need more time. And that could be up to 16 weeks. If you're a runner or if you're an individual who's coming in with, I spin twice a week, I go to yoga twice a week, you're going to be coming in and you're still not going to be used to the impact. So we really like that 16-week time frame. You can certainly take it to 18 and 20 as you go. But really what you want to focus on are the time frame and having that runway. The other thing I think is really important when you look at your plan overall, if you're looking at a run plan, is just to consider, if you just imagine for a second, you have these levers that you can pull in your training. One of the levers is duration, one is frequency, duration or distance, one is frequency, and one is effort. So my general advice for any level of runner is making sure that you have the right structure and you're not pulling more than one lever at once. So for example, if you are running 3 days a week, you don't want to go to 4 or 5 days a week and be building your distance significantly at the same time. Now, certainly it's going to go up because you're running 2 more times that week, but you don't want to be like, oh, I normally do like a 3-3-8, and now I'm going to go 3-6-6-10, because your overall weekly distance is going to go way through the roof. So you don't want to pull on that distance lever or the frequency lever and the distance lever really hard together. And the big thing I see is like usually people do good in that realm. Where they get stuck is a common thing regardless of new existing runners. And it's a plan that likes to put a lot of speed workouts out, for the entirety of the plan. So like imagine, Tuesday's my speed work, Thursday is my easy run. Maybe I have a base run in between, and then I long run on Saturday. And they'll just do this repeatedly. Speed Tuesday, base runs, long run on the weekend. And as you're building up, early in your plan, you're not going to be having the really long runs, especially for the full marathon. Maybe you're running 8-10 miles at the start for that long run, and it's going to build up to 20. What we don't want to do is be building from 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20 while we're just cranking down on that speed lever too and doing a lot of speed workouts. One of the things that I found has worked really well is really dialing in and just considering your running plan as the first 50 to 70% is really about base and easy runs, maybe some progressions in there so that you can get your turnover going and you can work on some general fitness and building that. But the first 70% of your plan should be about getting your distances up, building your fitness, building your tolerance to impact. And then when you get about 8 weeks out from race day, so race day is Memorial Day weekend, we flip that back to end of April, end of March. End of March is really where you're going to start trying to maybe, if you want to, add speed work to your plan. So if you're looking at your plan, you're like, every Tuesday, oh my God, I got a speed workout. Just flop that around. You want to put a base run in there, and I'll talk about actually pacing in a little bit, but so often I see that what looks good on paper, especially if you're injury prone, is not good in practice. You don't need a lot of speed workouts early in your plan. And that's particularly true for age group athletes or first-time marathoners. In fact, one of the plans we have in Run Smart is it's just a level 1 plan, and it's comprised of base runs, easy runs, and progression runs, no speed. Because a lot of times on your first one, you just need to get the reps in. You need to get the effort in and just going through that training cycle before you're like, hammering. And there's this concept that people think of like, if I'm not working really hard and gassed on every single run, I'm in trouble or I'm not doing it right. That is not true. Your goal is to be, honestly, most of your runs should be conversation pace. So I talked about this term called base pace, and that's a really important thing to know. You can know the exact pace, like we plan that out for our runners in Run Smart in the app is here's your base pace, go and run this. But if you're like, you're not using it, or for whatever reason, you're not, maybe using a PDF or you're winging it, which I don't want you to do. Base pace is conversation pace running, and that's going to be the majority of your plan. The tendency for most runners is to drift to breakdown pace is what I call it, where you're out for a run and you're like, this isn't easy, but it's not super hard either. I can do it. And that kind of drift towards semi-hard all the time is what breaks a lot of runners down. And I see this from people who qualify for Boston. I see it from new runners. It's this concept of just running too hard too often. So as you look at your plan, just be really careful on how quickly you're building up, making sure you have enough time. Know that you're going to have to forfeit a week here or there as you go. And then don't be so focused on speed early in that plan because it just skyrockets your risk for injury. And while the speed work will get you fitter, it will get you faster, it does not matter if your knee is a grapefruit because it's so beat up from all the impact. So we want to be careful there. We want to make sure we're building in time for life in general and just be okay with it. Now, when we look at what causes the risk for injury, we're going to talk about different statistics in here. And I worked some research into this and just kind of pulling it up is 2021 research. They found two things that make a runner more apt to get injured. So if your goal is to get to the start line, you don't want to put all this work in and then A, have to defer, or B, limp through this thing, which I've done, and it's not fun. But I pulled up some research, and one of the things that they talk about is new runners are at a drastically increased risk for injury. And based on what I told you already, this should make sense. You would think people that have been running for years got to be hurt way more than new runners because they don't have the combined impact. Your body's an amazing thing. Your body will adapt to the forces you put into it. So when new runners, they start off and they get too aggressive early, they almost always get beat up because their body's just not used to this new activity. And this is pretty consistent across the board. And that same study, it was in 2021, they also saw that those runners who have a lower running volume tend to get hurt more often as well. And honestly, this is something I've been telling people for years because if you run, we didn't talk about this, but frequency-wise, you should be at least 3 times a week. When you run twice a week, once a week to get ready for these races, the gap in between one run to the next isn't frequent enough. Your body loves time to learn. So without having enough frequency and having a lower running volume, it makes sense that you're going to be at a higher risk for injury because if you run on Monday every week and that's your training plan, which believe it or not, I've seen, and if you're an experienced runner, you're like, oh my God, don't do that. But by the time the next Monday comes around, your body's already forgotten about, what's happened, where you're at, and it just increases your risk for injury. And when we talk about from a physical therapy standpoint, and what I'm seeing, this is supported by the research, not only when you evaluate all the things that we see in general from runners, from our patients, and we aggregate all that data, but research in 2024 found that really 75% of your injuries are going to be at your knee and below. So that's, they reported in this study I'm reading here is 26% at the knee, 24% at the foot, 24% at the lower leg. So roughly knee down is going to accomplish 75% of your injuries. So it's hard enough to not get hurt when you're running. Having the wrong training plan is like a beeline for the med tent. You need to just make sure that you're capturing and you're just training smart across this process. Now, we talked about the base building phase. We talk about base pace, but really that first 50 to 70% is your base building. That's where you're going to be doing a lot of easy base runs, maybe some progression runs. You're going to be avoiding your tempo runs early, your long run. We want to talk about that a little bit, which is in this training cycle. There's this mindset that I need to run race pace. And this probably not resonate as much for people doing their first one because they're like, I don't know what race pace is. But for those runners out there who are doing their second, third, fourth marathon, they probably have an idea of what the goal is. And there's this concept mentally when I work with runners that if I don't run my race pace on these long runs, how do I know I'm going to do it? And I would tell you that is another just real easy way to get hurt is going out for your long run at race pace. Really what you should be focused on is getting that distance completed, finishing strong, working on nutrition, maybe a little bit of race pace mixed into the middle, but the rest of it is base, or you're progressing up to race pace and then coming back off of it. So when you look at those long runs, please, 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 if you want to get to this race healthy, you need to make sure that you're not doing a lot of long run at race pace. And what we'll generally do, remember I talked about like the 8 weeks before the race, that's when you start doing your speed work. That's when you're going to be going faster than race pace, a little bit of race pace. And there's this magic thing I always talk about. This is your first marathon. There's this magic of race day and the amount of adrenaline that can flow through you. There's nothing like race day. So you might go out for these runs. You're like, I set this goal for myself. It seemed reasonable, but I'm doing this and it seems like I'm not going to be able to do that pace because it's just so hard. I would tell you that a lot of times the race pace is hard in training when you're by yourself, you're not tapered, you're not fueled the best because, work in life, and you go out and you're like, there's just no chance. I promise you, race pace is definitely doable if you can do the right things along the way. And the worst thing to do is run race pace all the time because that's your, what you want to do on race day or on race weekend. It's just like it's almost a certainty that you're going to get hurt, or at least maybe not a certainty, but you're drastically increasing your risk to get hurt. So just be really careful about that. It's an important piece. And especially if you're someone who's coming in with a good fitness, a lot of times we talked about earlier, a runner who's maybe spinning a lot, they have good fitness in general, but maybe it's not running fitness. And then they're going to kind of enter this realm. I use this analogy with runners of engine of a car and the frame of the car. So cardiovascular, your heart, your lungs, that's your engine. That's how fit you are. But your body, your joints, your muscles, your tendons, that's the frame of the car. So people who come in really fit, you just got to be really careful on this realm because you'll go out and you'll run and you'll be like, oh my God, my heart, my lungs are great. I could do this all day. And your heart and your lungs outperform the rest of your body. And that's what you'll find when your knees are getting sore all the time. You're like, I don't understand. Like, I'm just sore and my legs hurt and my heart, my lungs want to go. My body says no. A lot of times that's because your fitness is outperforming. We see this a lot, honestly, with people who are coming back from injury because you lose your body's ability to handle the impact much faster, like your strength and your tissue tolerance to impact. You lose that a lot faster than your cardiovascular fitness. So we'll see like people come back after injury, 4 weeks off, they haven't run, and they go out and they're like, I felt like I could run forever. And then their knees sore again because they overdo it. So I don't want to overwhelm. I'm hoping you guys can take a couple nuggets from these things and put them into practice. There's a lot that goes into this. That's why training smart is really important. And when you talk to runners, you'll find that a lot of them have been hurt and are hurt. And that's part of the sport, unfortunately. It's just how do you manage these things along the way? The first bit is to do your best to prevent them from happening. And a lot of these are going to be training issues, fueling issues, stuff like that. So as we move through these long runs, you're progressing your durability. They're not fitness tests, remember. You're going to progress them gradually. I think what I find, if you're thinking like, okay, how am I going to progress my long runs? I have my plan in front of me. Again, we're not going to wing it, but you're going to look and say, how am I going to progress these things? Generally, what I like to find, depends on how much time you have, because you can progress a little bit slower, but 1 to 2 miles per long run is easily doable in the half. So if you start off at 5 or 6 miles, it's easy to build up and kind of peak out around that 10-mile range, depending on the runner. If you're more experienced, some half marathoners will go to 10, 14, 16, 18 for the half marathon. So they go well beyond it. Majority of runners are going to get up to that 10 mark. Once you can go 10, I guarantee you can go 13. Remember, race day is a magical day. You can definitely do it. The biggest thing here, actually, I'll take a step back and go to the full marathon. Usually it's like a 2-4. It goes up by 2. So you might 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, something like that. The biggest thing here is just to avoid huge spikes. And there was research I have written down here from actually last year. And they looked at 5,200 runners in a study and across over 500,000 running sessions. Remember, I talked about a lot of runners will get hurt. And it's just part of the game. 35% of people in the study got hurt and sustained an injury. So they looked back and they looked at their running data coming from their watches and said, okay, like, well, is there anything that is very indicative of like, hey, if you do this, you're increasing your risk for injury? The biggest thing that they found was large spikes in running volume nearly doubled the risk for injury. So the way that this works is just progressing that long run way too quickly. So I did 10 to 14, or I did 13 to 17 or 18. Like, you have these big jumps in long runs. So if you follow that 1 to 2 miles, added on to the previous long run, it works really well. And then just making sure, if you do, like, let's say you get the flu, I'm not trying to jinx anybody, but something happens, or you have to travel for work and you miss some time over Easter break, or you're traveling with your family rather over Easter break, and you miss a long run. It was supposed to be 12 miles. And then because you missed the 12, the next one's 16 or 14, but now you missed the 12. So now it goes 10 to 14, too big of a jump. So I think if you look at things, just know that big spike in running volume or not running volume, long run distance can drastically increase your risk for injury. It's something we see all the time. So 1 to 2.5 miles, 2 miles max from one long run to the next on the full. And while we're there, I think it's important just to talk about like that progression. And this will be for half and full. This will be for new runners, existing runners who've gone to Boston, who are really high level. There's a thing that we use in Run Smart, and I termed it the 2-to-1 principle, which isn't very fancy, but what it means is a 2-week build, 1-week recovery. So imagine you're going to take your volume, you're going to build for 2 weeks, and then you're going to drop down and recover. You're going to build for 2 weeks and drop down and recovery. So if you were just to plot these lines, you'd have a point a little bit higher to the right, and then it drops down below the first point. And then the next point's a little bit higher than the pre-recovery week or the pre-drop down. What this does, this 2-to-1 principle, 2 weeks of build, 1 week recovery, it gives your body this time so you can recover. You can make sure that you're not constantly building. Like, I've seen people just like, there's no recovery, they're building up, or the recoveries don't drop down far enough, which we'll talk about. But you want to make sure that you're building 2 weeks, coming down 1. And from a mental standpoint, I find it super valuable, and my runners have as well, because, again, if you have a life and, you have kids and a full-time job and all these things and going on, I like the mental side of this, where I'm either going on a recovery week or coming off. So if I go for 2 weeks on, that first week, I'm coming off a recovery week. I'm going to be a little bit fresher. Going into that next week, it's going to build. It's going to require more time. But I know after that, I'm going to come into a recovery week. And those little builds and drops make a difference over time from like a mental standpoint and a time management, but they also seem to work really, really well from a just overall training standpoint. This is something I learned. My first marathon was the Buffalo Marathon, and I think it was 2008, something. It was a disaster. And, I limped from aid station to aid station. I didn't train well. I used a PDF online. It was 2008, so a lot less options out there. And I came back and I tried to do another one, 6 months later at Niagara Falls, and the same thing happened. But I didn't have a lot of these principles in place. So after that second one really kind of bombed out, I ran the same time, both of them, limped through both of them, after mile 20. I started to read a lot of literature, read a lot of, coaching experts and putting a plan together. And then I implemented this into Run Smart, and we built plans for people. And there's thousands upon thousands of plans that really work in this framework of 2-to-1 principles, how to structure your long runs. It might seem overwhelming, especially if this is your first time. Like, I just want to run. This guy's nuts. But remember, 35% of runners got hurt in that study. 1 in 3. It's really tough. So you don't have to overthink it. Again, just go to the Run Smart app, build your plan. You'll see how this works. You just open it up and says, I have to run this amount today. And you just go out and do it. It doesn't have to be complicated. You can really work on training smarter that way. So as we continue to talk through this, I'm hoping you're taking some snippets. I want to talk about something that's maybe a little bit specific to Buffalo. It can be specific to really, I guess, Florida and the warmer states, maybe if you have sand around you. But I'm going to put this specific to Buffalo because this is Buffalo race weekend. And with the half and the full, if you're training, we talked about, the full January has already started. February is when the half will likely start for a lot of runs. you're gonna have to run in the snow at some point. And I just want I want this me sitting on your shoulder as a physical therapist. I want you to just remember that running on clean pavement, it's going to sound super simple to you when I say it out loud, but running on pavement that's dry, that's nice and, predictable is way different than running in the snow. So you need to make some adjustments. Now, I mentioned earlier that when you run, you have 2 to 4 times your body weight coming down in contact with on one leg. And if you do that 180 times a minute, a lot of impact. But that impact of 2 to 4 times your body weight, when it lands, if your foot slides, actually take a step back. Every step you take during that time frame, and you're running on the treadmill, you're running outside when it's not snowy, your body is learning how to tolerate shock, how to tolerate the running motion, and it's anticipating where that foot's going to land. So it knows how to sync up the muscles, control things so that when you land, everything's controlled. You hit the ground, you're nice and stable, and you pull through, you push off. Now you can imagine if your body's anticipating that and you go and you land, the foot sliding is going to be a huge problem. So, when that foot slides, things torsion. You can think of like your Achilles and your knee getting twisted, and over time that can cause a lot of problems. What your body anticipates and what it's expecting is different than what happens at landing. Then you go to push off, your foot tracks behind you. You go to push and your ankle slips a little bit and you push off the side of your foot funny. Those things, especially for us here in Buffalo, are a huge challenge for runners. And one of the things I always kind of recommend, and this can be tough because there's this badge of honor of like, it was -4 out. I went for a run. My eyelashes are frozen. Look at how badass I am. But it is opening the door. It's opening the door for injury. It's going to cause some problems at some point, most likely. So, you can go and be a badass outside, but I think it's really important to make sure you make the right adjustments. So, for example, with our plans on Run Smart, we have this little thing you can go in and it'll just tell you to adjust the pace. Like, oh, it's slippery out today. This is how I'll adjust it. With that, like you'll see a pace adjustment from someone who's running an 8-minute mile to an 8:45 because we slow you way down because you can't be slipping and sliding over things. So I think it's just, I don't have a hard number for you to adjust by like 5%, 10%, whatever, but you should be adjusting drastically and slowing way down. The other problem with it is, aside from like the slipping and sliding and like your foot expecting where to land, this is also where I see a lot of the traumatic injuries. Every year, someone breaks their tibia because they slipped on ice and they landed on a sidewalk funny and they break their tibia. So while running outside, your call, go ahead and do it. It's going to be fine. Just be aware that you got to pull way back on those runs and just do your best to keep your stability. I personally do a lot of running on the treadmill, and people will think like, oh, when I run on a treadmill, I run so different. I've seen thousands of people run, and I can count 5 times where someone was drastically different. It is not common. And you remember, your body's like, if you're running, it knows the running motion. It's not going to be like, oh, Steve's running on a different surface today. Let me change my complete motor pattern and everything I know about running to something different. That doesn't happen. So, don't think that the treadmill is going to change how you run. Usually it's a mental game for a lot of people. They don't want to run on a treadmill because they call it the treadmill. They call it, it just sucks sometimes. So I think the big thing is trying to find the mental games. Everyone has them if you've been running long enough and you use a treadmill. I like to just, I cover it up. I can't see the time and I'll watch a show and make sure I know how long the show is. I don't look at that distance until the show's over, or I won't look until every 5 songs play to see how far I've gone. It seems silly, but you have to control that mental game when you're going through it. A funny story about that is we do this analysis for a lot of runners, and we encourage them to just send us video of you running on the treadmill. And someone from San Diego, they wrote back, and it was eye-opening because, you don't think about it here in Buffalo, but like no one owns a treadmill here because it's nice all year. So she eventually sent her video in to us from outside, which is fine. But if you're coming from San Diego, this probably doesn't matter unless you're running on the beach, because you think about the beach, if it's loose sand, same thing. You go to push off, sand slides out from underneath your foot. You can cause some issues. So don't be afraid of the treadmill. Winter miles cost people a lot of training time. So just be careful with the entire thing. All right. 2 more topics I want to cover that I think are going to be helpful for you, whether this is your first marathon or your last, not your last. We're not going to edit that out. It's not your last marathon. Whether this is your first or your 10th or your 100th, I want to talk about fueling a little bit. We're going to bring somebody onto the show that is an expert in this area. But I think there's certain things you can do today that will help your training and help you get to where you want to be. And one of which is just how do you think about fueling in the realm of the big picture, but also in recovery. So first things first is that you want to be practicing, especially for the full marathon, your fueling. How many gels, what kind of food are you eating? How are you getting your carbohydrates during your long runs? Because you need to practice it. You need to see what your tummy is going to tolerate. You don't want to be running, porta-john to porta-john because you realize whatever you tried on race day, nothing special is going to happen if you're sitting in the john the whole time. So practicing that in the long runs, I will tell people, just as a general guidance, you want to start playing around with, how many, let's say it's gels per hour. You look on the back, you should be really thinking about, how do I get myself for a full marathon up to 40 to 70 grams an hour of carbohydrates? How do I practice that? How do I make sure my body's going to be okay with that? Majority of things that go wrong on race day are, especially if you trained well, are fueling issues. So really practicing that is going to be important. When it comes to training, you're going to do that. But I think there's something simple you can work on, which is, how do you recover from a long run, hard workout, strength workout, whatever? And there's good research that's come along with this. And a lot of people know you should be eating protein. You need to have all these carbohydrates in your diet or whatever. But I want to just kind of give everyone a tip of what to look for. And really it's like having carbohydrates and protein together post-workout. The protein is obviously going to help you rebuild and recover, and the carbohydrates are going to make things more available for you. So there's this thought like, oh, I'm just going to have a protein bar or a protein shake in water. And it's been found that when you mix carbohydrates with those proteins, you're going to get the uptake a lot faster, and you're going to enhance your recovery with that. The other thing is there is a window for timing of this. So generally, when you finish a workout or a long run, your body is more sensitive to uptake. It senses it's breaking down, it senses it's using a lot of energy. When you get done with exercise, you roughly have about a 90-minute window to really kind of maximize your uptake and maximize your recovery through nutrition. Not saying after 90 minutes, and it's not a hard 90, but after 90, you're still going to get some benefit. The most benefit is going to happen as quickly as you can after that workout. Now, certainly you could have some digestive issues. If you haven't done a 20-mile long run, at some point, you might find that you're nauseous after, and it takes some time to come around. But within 90 minutes is when you're going to get the most benefit from recovery drink. Protein shakes are the easiest because you don't have to make something, but normal whole food is fine too. But mixing the carbs and the protein together are really important. The carb will enhance the protein effect. It does this through insulin. We're going to talk a lot about that in future episodes, but it's an easy thing you can do. Finish a hard workout, finish a long run within 90 minutes, pair a high protein snack meal with some carbohydrates. It's going to help your body get what it needs to recover, because the breakdown is going to happen. And when we talk about injury prevention, we'd really love to prevent them. We don't want that to happen. So the last thing I want to talk about is something, take another sip of coffee here. I'm probably not edit this out, but that's how it goes. So as a physical therapist, this is the part I'm excited about. And it's the last thing we want to talk about, which is strength training. And we're not going to get into exercises or anything, but I want people to think about, how do you train for this thing, and how do you do your best? And it's not just by just running. You can get away with that for a while. Experienced runners know, the older runners know. It gets harder to do that as things go along. So strength training has a role both in your durability, your efficiency, your overall tolerance. I call strength training is the glue that holds your training together, so that the tissue tolerance, that your tendons and your muscles can get pulled on, your joints can get compressed, but they have the control through the muscles so that they're not getting dragged on. This is where strength training really shines. And there are priority areas, like people like, what should I focus on? And I think the important thing is to think about initially compound movements over isolated movements. So what you want to do is you're going to find, especially as you're training for something, this time gets tough. Especially when you got these runs during the week, you got to go to work, you got to get the kids off the bus, you got to get them to practice, whatever. You're gonna be short on time on days. So you want to maximize your time in the gym, or if you're doing a home workout, we kind of pair those in with Run Smart. If you're doing one of those, you want to take the 30 minutes and get the most accomplished as possible. So what you don't want to do, and I said this earlier, is you don't want to isolate. You don't want to sit on a machine, isolate your quads. You don't want to stand on a calf machine and isolate your calf. Ideally, what you'd like to do is, turn your quad on, your calf on, your hamstrings on, all in one movement, strengthen them all in one movement, 3 sets of 10, touch everything, and then go to the next thing and train this whole movement that supports the running motion. So generally what we like to do is have a general rule is you should be in standing for most everything. Some exceptions to core and things where you have to be on the ground because it's just easier to control and things, but get yourself into standing and work on compound movements. Simple things, right? Like you can do a squat to a calf raise. So you squat down, you come up, you do a calf raise. You can do side lunge to balance. You can do what we call balance and reaches, which we use a lot in our programs. These are the things that are going to carry over best to running. They're also going to be things that are going to save you the most time in your training. And when you're thinking like, well, how much do I have to do here? Because time is going to be an issue. Truthfully, I find 2 sessions a week is plenty. And if you give yourself 30 minutes, 2 sessions a week, or even if you break it down, 4 15-minute sessions using compound movements, you're touching all the parts, you'll be in a really good spot. I generally find that working them into like a warm-up or cool down is a great thing because you can treat those strength workouts as part of the overall workout. And it's going to support long-term consistency. You think about your training plan now, it's January, versus end of April. When you're peaking, you have your longest runs yet, your most time committed in a single week. This time, January, February, is where you laid that foundation in the base so that if you do miss some time, you're at least pulling. So if you imagine, if you take your left hand and hold it up to your forehead, if that's your starting point, and you stop strength training, you're going to dip down maybe to your nose. But now take your hand and let's say go back to your forehead. If you go up to above your head and you stop strength training, you're going to come down maybe to your forehead. So you still are going to dip because you missed some strength later in your plan, but because you built up this reserve strength, you're going to be in a much better spot. So January, February, great time to build strength. Great time to get off machines, stand up. I mean, it's as simple sometimes as doing if you like to do arms. Instead of doing the curl machine at the gym, grab the dumbbells, stand on one foot, and do your curls to an overhead press. You got your curl, you got your overhead press. You can work on your balance while you're doing that, and you're going to get a lot of benefit from just doing an entire movement of strength training. There's a study. I just want to bring this up because I thought this was funny. I'm gonna look at it here. First of all, there was a study about 10 years ago, and they reviewed all the other studies, and it showed a 66% reduction in injuries when you have a good strength training program. Now, good is somewhat hard to quantify. We can talk about that at another point when we get to, talking to physical therapists on this season. But one of the studies that jumped out to me was in 2023. They had 433 runners. They split them apart, and they gave half the runners nothing. That's their placebo, not placebo. That is our control group. And then the other half, they gave a strength training routine. When they look at these two groups, despite what you might think I'm going to say, they actually found no difference between the groups. So they went in and this doesn't match up to our other research, doesn't make sense. So they looked at it and they found out half the people that they gave exercises to weren't compliant enough to get it. So when they compared the highly compliant strength group, they significantly outperformed the people who were the control group. So it just means you got to do it. And I find that 60 minutes a week is kind of like the area where you want to get to, and you can do it. it's just a really important thing to add in, especially now when, the overall commitment is a little bit lower. One of the big questions I always get is like, do I do it before my workout? Do I do it after? How does that work? Can I do it on the off days? Whatever. I genuinely tell people, if it's a difference between not doing it and doing it, just do it. And I don't care if it's before or after or whatever. Just get it done. Personally, I think it's better to do it after because you don't want to like hit your glutes and then go out for a run, and this core muscle that's responsible for a lot of things in your run is super tired because you crashed them, in a strength workout. Personally, that's what I think. Personally, that's not what I do. I have this mental block where I stop running and I'm like, I'm not doing anything else. I'm done. I finished my run. I usually have to put my strength in front of it, and I'd be smart about what kind of things I do there. But mentally, I just like to do my strength first because then I can get to do my run, which is, for me, is my reward. If you're new to this, running can be a reward for you at some point. But the strength training is a core component. You really should be thinking about keeping those things flowing. And all of this is doable. Each segment of this can sound daunting, like, oh my God, what did I sign up for? There's so much to know and do. You just need to get plugged into a system. That's going to make a huge difference. It can help a ton as you continue to go on this journey. And our goal is, especially if this is your first time, is to get you to do this, love it, and then return. But also not even just to the Buffalo running scene, but running scene in general, because it is transforming to just have running as part of your life. And I see this all the time. I saw it with myself. I saw it with a lot of other runners, and any established runner, they'll let you know how great running is and what they feel like when they don't run, because it becomes almost like there's this thing I saw, I can't remember what it was, but it is integral to your mental health once you get into it, and it's a great thing. Thank you for listening to this episode of Early Miles. This podcast is ad-free and made possible by the runners who support the RunSmart app. RunSmart is a training platform built by physical therapists who run with an injury prevention first approach. Inside the app, you get personalized running plans, strength and mobility work designed specifically for runners, and guidance that adapts to your life, training, and body change over time. RunSmart's mission is simple: to build lifelong runners. If you're looking to train smarter and support the show, you can download the RunSmart app to get started. And a quick but important note, this podcast is for general educational and informational purposes only. Nothing discussed here should be considered medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always consult a qualified healthcare professional regarding injury, pain, or any medical condition. Thanks again for listening. We'll see you next time on Early Miles.